Have a good one.
All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are waiting for everybody to file in right now into the webinar. We'll give everybody a few minutes. In the meantime, make yourselves comfortable. We will begin this workshop series very shortly. Really want to thank everybody for attending, and we're actually blown away by the sheer number of people that are actually joining right now. This is fantastic. Hope everybody is doing wonderfully and doing well. We'll start in about 3 minutes. Sounds about right. We'll be having a great time today. We really appreciate everybody coming. Like I said, get yourself comfortable, get a glass of water, use the restroom, do whatever you need to do. I will be one of the people answering the question on the side. Hari, nice to meet you. And I do not want to actually slaughter the first person's name that came up in this list, but I just want to say hello, everyone. All right, give ourselves about 2 minutes and we'll get going. Wow, let the numbers go. I'm very happy and very excited about this. Guys, this will be a hands-on session, so we will have a little bit. We sent out an email beforehand explaining some of the requirements. We'll be also talking about, things that are coming up. This is one of four. There'll be four more series. We'll talk about that at the end. I encourage you guys to come. I will be the host for all of them, and I will be bringing in various solution engineers from JFrog to explain various aspects of best practices around using our products. And actually, you know what, Jacob, I think it's a good time for us to actually go in and start. So I'm going to kick this off. Welcome, everybody, wherever you are in the world, to our DevNext series here by JFrog. The idea here is to provide a lot more hands-on education from some of our experts. Today, you'll have one of my favorites who will be actually hosting and doing the thing that he does. Today's workshop is called Mastering DevOps Package Management with JFrog Artifactory. We will go in a minute to kick this off. I see everybody's coming. Yep, there we go. Will you ask any poll questions? We probably won't be asking any poll questions, but I do encourage you, if you are or you have any questions or anything like that, I will be monitoring the Q&A. I will let Jacob do his thing. I'll be putting links in here and lots of other good stuff for you guys to utilize to back up what Jacob is talking about. But let's kick this off. I think this is a good place to go. Jacob, can you hit the next slide, please? So as stated, my name is Bill Manning. I am actually one of the solution engineering managers here at JFrog. I've been with JFrog for just about 7 years now. My job is to work with our customer base and figure out the best solution for DevSecOps that is out there, utilizing our platform. I'm also one of our main speakers. I do a lot of our talks. Next week, I'll be at KubeCon in Chicago. If you happen to be there, please swing by. And the following week after that, I'll be in London giving a talk about software bill of materials and our curation product, which is something down the line that you guys might be interested in. And I am joined today with the enigmatic, amazing Jacob Kelly. Jacob Kelly is a guy who works on my team. He is an absolutely amazing individual. Very honored to work with him. Jacob, why don't you do a quick introduction on who you are?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. Name's Jacob Kelly. I'm a solution engineer here at JFrog. And today we're going to be teaching you about the ins and outs of Artifactory, repositories, some of the automation you can do and how it fits into the DevSecOps platform. You know, I come from a security background as well as a DevOps developer and release management background. And the ability to use Artifactory has helped me day in and day out throughout my tenure in the IT industry. And I'm hoping to teach you guys how to use it and leverage our platform to the best of its abilities. Thanks, Bill.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and kick it off to the next slide. So just a couple of quick things here. Just to let you know, from a logistics point of view, if you do have any questions or anything like that, I will be answering it. So there is a Q&A, a little tabby there. Just put your question in there. I'll do my best to go and answer that question as soon as I can. Also, too, we value your feedback tremendously. So at the end of this, you'll receive a short survey. Please fill it out and let us know how we did. And then on top of that, this is a private live environment. We actually sent out an email beforehand. Just to let you know, The environments that you'll be using for this series of workshops will be available for an extended period of time, which I'll talk about at the end. We usually only have a 14-day period for it. We've actually extended it for the people who are attending these conferences, this workshop that we have here. But without further ado, I just want to say thank you again. Jacob, the floor is all yours. I'm going to go on mute. I'm going to also remove myself from the images, and I'm going to let Jacob take it away, and I will be back here behind the scenes giving Jacob a hand. So please put those question and answers in, and I will do my best to answer them during the actual whole thing. Jacob, it's all yours, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So quick overview, we're going to go over the agenda and just kind of follow the contents listed out here. And again, if you have any questions during the process, feel free to type them in the chat for Bill to respond to. This is a working seminar, so after our presentation, we'll slip into a demo environment, as well as run some CLI commands, collect some build info, do some AQL, which is Artifactory query language. So setting the agenda, we're going to go over just a brief description about what DevOps is and what that methodology looks like in the software development lifecycle. We'll go through a brief description of Artifactory and how it fits into that software development lifecycle and the secure software supply chain, go over the ins and outs of what our checksum-based storage does, Artifactory, all about the repositories that you use from local, remote, virtual. We'll go over and do a little bit of container registry with Docker. That GitHub link that we provided in the email prior does have a Docker image in it, so we'll be using that for testing purposes. And then again, we're going to be using that CLI to collect the build info, publish our builds into Artifactory, so that way you can get and track your software development lifecycle with a lot of that statistical and environmental metadata. Following that, I'll show you how to use AQL and our CLI in combination to pull artifacts using command lines, so you can start automating that process and start doing your build promotion in a non-manual fashion. So moving forward from that, just a few things about JFrog, who we are in a nutshell. There are a few things I want to point out on this slide. I'll leave the rest of it for you guys to read, but we are a unified end-to-end platform in the secure software supply chain. And what that means is starting from the third-party library dependency resolution, we act as a reverse proxy for those open source registries. So you can pull those into Artifactory so it can act as a single source of truth and being an immutable copy for what your developers and your CI systems use, so you can make sure everyone's working with the same packages, all the way towards the distribution and the release of your binaries to your end customers in your production environment. We handle everything from that end-to-end platform. We are a hybrid multi-cloud environment, so it doesn't matter which development standpoint how you want to host our platform. We support both on-prem, in-cloud, hybrid, cloud agnostic in that favor. We support 30+ different package types as well. We are universal in nature in that aspect, as well as we've got over 10 different offices distributed globally. So we've got support handled for you guys from a 24/7 perspective, whether you're working here in the US like me and Bill, or if you're over in the EMEA or the APAC region, we've got you covered there as well. So no matter where you are, there's always going to be a frog or a swamp nearby where we can support you guys. So from the DevOps standpoint, what is the software supply chain? So the software supply chain is essentially the continuous deployment and the continuous flow of your binaries from the planning stage over to the release, operation, and the monitoring standpoint. So here at JFrog with Artifactory, we kind of get started at the binary level, but our product does shift left towards the development side into the developer's IDE. So once you and your industry is done with the planning phase, where you've gone and you've determined the features that you want your developers and to produce, to distribute to your users, you move on towards the code phase, where the developers are going to start pulling in third-party libraries to speed along that software development lifecycle. So that's where our virtual repositories come in when using Artifactory. That's that reverse proxy, where it connects to your open source registry, pulls those artifacts into Artifactory to give you a local immutable copy. So that way your developers and your CI systems are no longer reliant on that open source registry. From the build perspective, we work with plugins as well as using our CLI to help gather and push your environmental and statistical build metadata, so you can track your builds throughout the software development lifecycle with a build once and promote methodology that we use as a best practice when you're utilizing Artifactory. Throughout the test, release, and deployment side, Artifactory fits within that as well, because you can use property sets to enable the testing side of things by being able to track the release gates through the software development lifecycle. Using our checksum-based storage, you can promote within different repositories. And what the checksum-based storage does is it provides free moves and copies of your artifacts, as well as deduplication of the data. So you're never storing more than one copy of any given artifact or artifact layer. The deployment side, like I said, we are a full end-to-end platform. So whether you're distributing binaries and release bundles, such as Helm charts, Docker images, using our JFrog distribution part of our platform, or if you've got over-the-air updates that you need to handle with Linux devices, we've got you covered with JFrog Connect as well. So throughout the software development lifecycle, Artifactory works in some way with either the developer, your CI tools, your distribution systems. Artifactory acts as that single source of truth and that single pane of glass for everything that you need for your DevOps journey. So as an Artifactory overview, what we've got here is when you're working with Artifactory, which is our cornerstone product here at JFrog, you're going to get started with your repositories. And when you get started, there are two distinctions between the primary two different repository types. We've got our local repositories. These are going to be hosting your local proprietary artifacts, things that you're manually uploading, your CI tools are producing for when you're in the software development lifecycle. As well, we've got our remote repositories. And I've mentioned this before, those act as the reverse proxy to the open source registry. So you can pull those artifacts and have local copies within your Artifactory instance as well. During today's workshop, we will go through the creation of both of these, as well as our third type of repository, which is a virtual repository. So you can aggregate both the local and remote repositories under one URL to simplify the configuration for your developers and your CI instances. So when you're using Artifactory as an artifact repository, this allows you to create fully traceable builds. Like I mentioned beforehand, we do a build once and promote methodology. So once you create your release or your artifact from your CI system, whether it's Jenkins, Bamboo, TeamCity, you're going to push that into Artifactory along with its build info. This is going to give you everything that you need to reproduce the build from the buildinfo.json, which is stored under the builds tab of Artifactory, as well as any environmental, statistical, and system metadata that comes along with your build environment. All of that's stored within Artifactory. You can promote that to the software development lifecycle using either release tags, release bundle v2 that we have recently released into our Artifactory instances, or by using separate repositories using our 4-part naming convention. Using AQL or the UI, you can actually search for artifacts. Getting real-time results is through the current state of your Artifactory instance. AQL is Artifactory query language. You can use this to circumvent the UI and use our CLI to pull and search for artifacts. As well, using our checksum-based storage, we do database searches within the UI, so it's lightweight and responsive no matter how many artifacts that you are serving, as long as your system handles it. And then finally, you can actually manipulate your artifacts as well. You get that free move copy of artifacts with our checksum-based storage, and then the deletion artifacts is there as well. So you've got full CRUD capabilities. We have a built-in recycle bin as well. So if there is some sort of manual error or human intervention you need to recover your artifacts, there is a time to live on that. So nothing is fully deleted without emptying that recycle bin. So we've got you covered just in case any potential misclicks may happen. All of this is done through the UI or the CLI. Doesn't matter how you want to interact with Artifactory, we've got you covered on that standpoint. So some of the benefits of using Artifactory would be its flexibility in the DevOps namespace. You can proxy or store all your artifacts. Again, we support 30+ different package types, and that's always growing. Again, we are very flexible in the deployment nature, whether you're wanting self-hosted, SaaS, or hybrid, multi-cloud and multi-region. We're cloud agnostic in that nature, so you get the same great experience, whether we're hosting the infrastructure or you host it yourself. The exact same Artifactory is served up to you to meet your company's regulations and what your needs are. Again, it fully automates into your DevSecOps process. We are a full end-to-end platform, not only in the artifact storage space, but also in the security space. We do have our X-ray, which will be covered later on November 15th in the second part of this 4-part series. So you can look forward to that. Today, we're just going to be dealing with Artifactory, which again acts as a single source of truth for your DevSecOps journey. Because you do a build once and promote methodology within Artifactory, you know the exact same artifacts that you pushed into dev should be moved on to QA, staging, production, and every environment in between throughout the software development lifecycle. And this metadata enables the observability of this between that build promotion. So whenever you do a build promotion within Artifactory, when you get that copy, not only is it copying the artifact itself, but the build info comes along with it. So you're ensuring the immutability of that it is the exact same build output that went into dev that goes into QA and eventually into production. So after that, it's the trusted foundation for your DevOps platform. You can use Artifactory to access, to use as, again, distribute the software as well. I told you we are an end-to-end platform, so Artifactory acts as the access and the use, whereas our distribution part of our platform, or the JFrog Connect, can help you release that out to your customers. It does have global reach and management. We have mission control. Whenever you're working with multiple JFrog deployment platforms, you can navigate and monitor all of your platform deployments through one UI. And then finally, the cloud native DevOps. Like I mentioned before, we're full multi-cloud and hybrid with flexibility. You're able to manage and use push and pull-based replication between those JPDs to ensure that everyone's working on the same binaries on a day-to-day basis. So geographic issues can be circumvented using that methodology. So just for JFrog and the day of the life in terms of the development view from either a dev or a CI perspective, we'll work through this to see how Artifactory fits into the day-to-day use of the developer. So first, starting here in the top left, you've got the developer, and as they're working in their IDE, whether it's Eclipse, IntelliJ, Visual Studio, as they start building out their software for their features, they're going to start pulling in those third-party dependencies. And when they do that, and they start pulling those Maven files, those jar files, maybe a NuGet file, they're going to declare those dependencies through the remote repositories in Artifactory. So the CI tool is going to reach out to Artifactory, and it's going to see if they've got these artifacts local in their in their storage. If it does not, Artifactory is going to reach out to the public registries, pull those artifacts into Artifactory, store them locally, get their checksum, store that 256 hash, and then deliver those artifacts to the developers so they can continue working on their feature. During this process, any subsequent downloads from other developers or CI tools will reach into Artifactory. And since they are now stored locally, rather than reaching out to the remote repositories open source registry, they can serve them up locally. So the resolution of these artifacts should be quicker, which reduces your build time as well. And now after the developer commits these changes to your VCS, like I just mentioned beforehand, it'll get checked into your CI servers. You will then move on to produce a build. And as the build is, as the build process starts, it will look to resolve the dependencies that the developers have included within the dependency files for that project. And again, since they have already declared and pulled these remote repository third-party libraries into Artifactory, it's going to serve these up to the CI server without having to reach out to the registry. So it'll serve them up locally. After the build is completed, your CI system will then push the build along with its build info into Artifactory, so that way it can move on to the quality control environments, whether that be QA, staging, and then during that process, your developers or your QA team members will perform any sort of automated manual user acceptance testing, tag those with any sort of property or property sets, and promote those throughout the software development lifecycle. Again, moving that metadata throughout your repositories, making sure it's the same artifacts that are gone from source to destination. Finally, you reach the distribution side. of Artifactory, where it goes to deploy your artifacts to your production level environments. This can be done with things such as Docker, JFrog pipelines, Chef, distribution, connect, and then you would serve those out to your production level servers. So Artifactory sits at the heart or the center of your development pipeline because it is used from the development step all the way to the deployment and distribution side of things. And so what this looks like in terms of storage whenever you're setting up your Artifactory infrastructure is what we use here at JFrog is what's called checksum-based storage. So any artifact that comes into Artifactory, we do a SHA-256 hash of these artifacts. These are then stored into your file store here. And then on the opposite side, we'll have a database entry for this as well. The database entry is going to have the SHA-256 name as well as its location and the original name and location. This gives you that data deduplication. So when you're producing multiple builds, or if you're pulling or you have a reliance on a particular third-party library in multiple locations, rather than store that third-party library, if you say you've got 10 references to that library, rather than store it 10 times, we'll store it once in the file store and then create 10 different references to that based on its location in your guys' dependency files. So you can see that here, metadata 2 and 3 are pointing to the same artifact in the file store. This also gives you free copy and move because rather than duplicating the artifact itself, all we're doing is manipulating the database entries on the back end. So if you're duplicating it or doing a copy, we'll create an additional entry in the database. And if you're doing a move, we're just doing an update to that data. This is great for file system performance as well as keeping the UI lightweight, because whenever you're searching for your artifacts, rather than doing a file store scan, we're doing a database search. So this is just a visual UI of how that kind of looks on the back end. You can see here, the actual file is stored as a SHA-256 hash, whereas on the database down here, we've got the original node path, the repository location, as well as its hash here on the back end. So this is what the database in the file store will look like on the back end. So I mentioned flexibility beforehand whenever you are installing, configuring your Artifactory instance. So if you are moving towards the self-hosted route and you don't want to have that SaaS offering, we have installation support. So whether it's from VM side with Linux, RVM, Debian, Windows, we've got you covered. You can do you can manage your clusters using Docker, Helm, and Kubernetes. We do have documentation for our for using Helm charts and Kubernetes. That way you can spin up your clusters in a JFrog documented manner. In terms of our databases, we support Derby, Postgres, Oracle, MariaDB, MySQL, and Microsoft SQL Server. When using self-hosted instances of Artifactory, by default, you will have an internal Derby database that will go along with your JFrog instance. If you are looking to use highly available installations, you will then have to move towards an external database, so just keep that in mind. And then in terms of binary storage on the file store side, we support NFS, AWS, Google Cloud Storage, as well as Azure Blob. We do have other more advanced options that we share online as well. Things such as file store sharding is where you can find some of that documentation online. So some of the key features of Artifactory are listed here. So on the self-hosted side, so for installation, like I said, we're very flexible. Installations can go from self-hosted to SaaS to multi-cloud to hybrid. They can all communicate with one another if you're hosting multiple JFrog deployment platforms. We support high availability. We're infinitely scalable on the horizontal axis. So it doesn't matter if you need 3 or 100 nodes, we do scale horizontally on a per license basis. Disaster recovery, we've got you handled there as well. The JFrog deployment platforms, we are able to replicate your artifacts with push and pull based replication. For our enterprise customers, we do support federated repositories, which is bi-directional syncing of your artifacts in real time. So exchange-based replication. So as developers or CI systems push artifacts on one instance, if you've got a secondary instance with federated repositories, those changes will propagate to the left and right. So in this instance, in a DR scenario, say You want to have an active DR on the east and the west coast of the US. If your East Coast instance goes down with Federation, your West Coast installation or JFrog platform will be up to date with those artifacts. And as developers or CI tools make changes on the West Coast, when your East Coast recovers, it'll propagate all those changes back over to the East Coast, so everyone's up and running with the latest and greatest artifacts. As well as we support Access Federation, which is the replication to your other JFrog platforms for users, groups, roles, permissions, as well as scoped access tokens. We do support software bill of materials as well at build times. Whenever you're publishing that build info that I mentioned beforehand, which we'll be going over in the workshop today, we do create software bill of materials for you in CycloneDX and SPDX format. With the simple click of a button, you can export those to a zip file and have those locally. And now, as long as you store your builds in Artifactory and you keep those builds, you can export that software bill of material on demand. We do also have a highly flexible AQL, which is artifact query language, to search out your artifacts and do any sort of promotion and manipulation of your artifacts based on the properties that come from the results of your search. And we have a light demo to show you how simple it is to set up Artifactory query language and then use scripting commands such as PowerShell or Bash scripting to automate that process with our CLI. We are universal in nature, so we have 30+ different repositories that we support, as well as a generic-based repository to where if you need to upload any sort of zip files or tarballs, you can upload those as well. And finally, on the self-hosted side, we have cold storage. So if the retention of your artifacts for long periods of time is an issue and you don't want to overburden your production instance, we do have cold storage. We can offload those artifacts to another JFrog instance where they can be maintained and stored for long periods of time. So that way your primary instance is not cluttered or overburdened by legacy artifacts. This is a sample architecture that we pulled from one of our customers, and we'll just kind of go through this real quick to show you how we support multiple platforms and how our federation works on the back end. So this is a 3-environment version of Artifactory. So you can see here on the left, we've got a staging environment that supports an HA cluster of 2 Artifactory nodes. We have a Postgres database and file store, and then X-Ray, our security tool, we've got a 2-node HA cluster as well with a Postgres database on the back end. So staging environments or a dev test environment is perfect for testing your automation processes, testing upgrades to Artifactory in an environment that shouldn't affect production and doesn't use production data. With that, secondarily, we've got a production data center one here. This is a 3-node Artifactory cluster. We recommend as a minimum when you go with high availability that you start at 3 nodes for your production level environments. This gives you redundancy and resiliency in terms of patching, as well as in case of server allergies, you've got additional nodes to fall back on. So in an instance where you are upgrading Artifactory, we do support rolling upgrades to where whenever you do upgrade an HA instance that you don't incur any outage. So you can do these during business hours or during operational times and not suffer any sort of downtime to your Artifactory instance. So your developers and your CI tools can keep working while you're pushing the latest and greatest that we have here at JFrog. In that instance, we would take down one node and it would do an update to Artifactory and then update any sort of database of the backend. Our databases are backwards compatible to where during this upgrade, your other versions of Artifactory that have yet to be upgraded can still push the artifacts and still work properly. After the upgrade process, it propagates these changes to secondary and third nodes. It's a best practice for 3 because if you are updating one node and it's out to be updated, you still have high availability and the ability to distribute your traffic between 2 nodes of Artifactory. Again, that's why we also have a 3-node cluster here for HA. And then lastly, in our DR site, it replicates our production. So for disaster recovery, it's still a 3-node HA cluster so that we can handle the exact same traffic that production expects to handle. And it does have a 3-node cluster for X-Ray as well. Now in the middle here, what we've got is push and pull based replication using federated repositories between the staging environment and the production level environment. And then on the right side, we also have access federation synchronizing the groups, the users, and the tokens as well as the repositories into disaster recovery. So in that case, if there were a DR incident and production were to go down, everyone would still have updated credentials in DR, as well as the tokens that would be used for service accounts, such as your CI/CD systems. Those would all be available to provide access in the DR environment as well. So that way, in case there is a disaster scenario, everyone is still up and running and there's no outages occurred while we're working on bringing back up a production level environment. And then finally down here, you can see, because this is a self-hosted environment, cold storage is available as well. So that way those legacy artifacts can be stored here without clustering up the production environment and making it a little harder to navigate with those legacy artifacts that are seldom used. So repository types. We've gone through this a few times during the talk today, but just as a reminder, we have local repositories. These are for your proprietary local artifacts that you want to manually upload, or that you're produce. You'll push those into your local repositories. If you're looking to create a reverse proxy or reach out to an open source registry, you would create a remote repository. These act as a lazy cache for your registry. So anytime that your developers or your CI systems make a pull into Artifactory for that third-party library or the transitive dependencies that need to come along with those libraries, we'll store a local copy in a remote repository. So that way you remove the reliance on that open source registry, as well the resolution time when your subsequent developers and your CI systems need that third-party library should be a lot shorter. Third, we've got the virtual repository. This is an aggregate of both your local and your remote repositories. This provides several security benefits. It supports the role-based access control as well. So it supports up to 20 different repositories as a best practice. Don't exceed 20 whenever you're adding virtual repositories, but this will allow you to resolve your local and your remote repositories under a single URL, rather than having to set up configuration for multiple URLs. And then, like I mentioned earlier, for the DR scenario, we do have the federated repository for bidirectional syncing and push and pull based replication for multi-site teams, projects, and disaster recovery. So this is what a virtual repository kind of looks like on the back end. So you've got your virtual repository here in the center that's made up of 3 different local repositories, as well as a remote. So what's going to happen here is if your CI server, your developer goes to deploy or resolve an artifact, they'll hit the URL for the virtual repository. If they need to serve up something into the local repository, such as the CI server, it'll push them into the local repository. But if they're doing a pull and they need to pull something from Docker Hub, they will actually connect to the remote repository instead, reach out to Docker Hub if we don't have that Docker image served up locally, pull it into the remote repository, and finally resolve it for the user or the CI server. So it's a way to simplify a lot of the commands that you'll be using whenever you're putting together your software development or your build processes. So now that we've gone through the slide deck, let's go towards the demo portion of our lab, and we are going to start creating some local repositories. So if you guys have gone ahead and set up that instance in the previous email, we're going to start working over there. So I'm going to move over to one of my demo instances here. My instance is soleng.jfrog.io. Yours will be different based on the URL name that you came up with. This should be changing. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to head to the application or the administration side of our platform. We're going to head down to repositories, and we're going to create some local repositories. So here on the top right, we're going to add repository. I'm going to start with a local. You can see here, these are our supported package types. You can peruse them at your leisure. Like we had mentioned before at the beginning of the presentation, these will be available for you guys to work in until the end of December for the other workshops that you guys are free to sign up for. We're going to start for our demo today. We're going to create a Docker local repository. So I'm going to name this DevNext. This is going to be a dev level repository for me. And then I'm going to, this is a local repository. And we follow a 4-part naming convention. So my team name is going to be just my name. So our, again, 4-part naming convention, team name, the technology, which is Docker, and then software development lifecycle, and then the type of repository. So let's just actually, I'm going to go, this will be DevNext. So we'll keep it on brand. So after that, I'm going to scroll down here. We're going to ignore a few of these. We're going to hit create local repository. Oh, okay. So, all right, Scott. Okay, so Scott, if your UI does not look like this, you can actually click on your user icon in the top right, and there'll be a button to switch to either the new or the classic UI. So if you'd like to change it to our UI, you can do that. All right, so if we're still following along, guys, we are going to create another repository. This time it's going to be a generic local repository for one of our commands used later on in the demo. So head back to new repository, and instead of Docker, we're going to head to the bottom right and hit generic. And we're going to make this a DevNext generic. Let's go local as, set this one up for QA, and then this is local as well. So we will create our local repository for our generic repo. Following that, we're going to start creating a remote repository. This is that reverse proxy. So under add repository, select remote repository this time. We're going to select Docker for this instance as well. For the key, let's go any sort of team name you would like. I'm going to stick with DevNext. And then I'm going to go Docker and remote. And so you can keep the URL the same for registry-1.docker.io. If you are using in the future any sort of private Docker registry that requires credentials, you can always test the URL and it'll let you know if it can successfully connect to the server. And we're going to hit create remote repository. You'll see here that it was successfully created. Then finally, we're going to create a virtual repository to resolve both Docker images under. So under virtual repository, we're going to select Docker again because it's Docker repository. So we'll just go with DevNext, Docker, and then virtual. And then the only difference here is we're going to have a list of our available repositories. We're going to search up DevNext. You can see here we've got 2 different Docker DevNext repositories that we can pull over. So I'm going to move those over. This is going to be our local and our remote repositories. And I'm going to create that virtual repository. All right, now that we have our repositories created, before we move on, we're going to go to user management. And we're actually going to create an access token. So rather than use your username and password, whenever going through the CLI, or if you put this in any sort of service account system, we recommend using a scoped access token rather than your username and password. So that way, if there is a breach and this becomes compromised, you can revoke the token and you don't have to reset up the user account. You can just generate a new token. So we're going to hit generate token in the top right. Give it a description. So I'm just going to go DevNext token. And now rather than scope it to admin, I'm going to scope it to a particular user. And I'm going to take my username. So you guys should grab your username as well. I'm going to set it to expire in 3 days. And then I'm going to generate the token. So as you can see here, we've got the token ID, we've got the expiration date, what it's scoped to, and then make sure that you copy this token to your clipboard and post it somewhere. We're going to be using it several times throughout the workshop today. So make sure that you've got that scanned, because once you hit copy and you close this pop-up, you can't retrieve it. You'll have to generate a new token. So now that I've got that new token, I'm going to close that. All right, so now that we've got our repositories, and if I head to the application side, Artifactory, and I head to artifacts, you guys should be serving up quite a few less artifacts than I am. But if I search DevNext, I should come up with my my dev local, my generic, my Docker remote, and then I've got my virtual up here. And you can see here in the virtual, the included repositories are the two DevNext Docker repositories that we created earlier. All right. Now, in the requirements email that we sent out a few days ago, you should have had ensured that you've got access to GitHub, and we're going to do a git clone real quick. So if you open up a command prompt and navigate to an area where you want these files to appear, we're going to do a git clone. So do git clone. I'm going to post this in the chat as well, the URL and the command that you'll need to pull from. So this will go in the generic chat. So there's that. And then I'm just going to type that in here. So there we go. So I'm going to hit that. And so it's going to start cloning things into registry. I'm going to change my directory here to, now that I've received all my documents. Should be a workshop. And as you can see here, I'm going to pull that up. I've got my DevNext workshop here. You should get a zip file with AQL, a Docker file, a generic zip file, and a README. So right now we're going to be dealing with the Docker file and the zip file. And then later on, we'll extract the files from AQL and we'll work with our Artifactory query language file. But first, we're going to edit our Docker file. So if you open that in a file editor of your choice, I'm going to move that over here. You can see here we've got a few wildcards. We've got the server name and then the virtual repository name that we need to update. So my server name here you can see is soleng.jfrog.io. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to copy it, open up my editor again, and replace the jfrog.io, soleng.jfrog.io. I'm going to need my virtual repository name. You should be able to find that in the UI as well. So if you click your virtual repository, the name here, it's a nice copy command, keeping it simple for you guys. We are going to paste that here as well. Make sure to get the wildcards out, the $ and the curly brackets. And so then we're going to save our Docker file. So you can see here in this simple Docker file, we're just going to attempt to call jfrog.io, go into the virtual repository and pull the Alpine Docker image and get its latest version. So I'm going to minimize that, pull that back over. All right, from there, we are going to run a Docker login. So open up your command prompt again. I'm going to do a Docker login. And the URL that you want to do the login for is your demo environment. So for me, it was soleng.jfrog.io. I've got existing credentials. It'll ask you for a username and password. You can provide those credentials if you like, or you can use the token under the password that we created just a few minutes ago. So I've got login succeeded here. So I'll give you guys a moment to get your credentials set up, and then we'll continue this demo. For those who are caught up, here is going to be the next command that we are going to produce, and it's going to be a Docker build. We are going to change the URL and the remote repository name, or the repository name to different, to your guys' URL and then the virtual repository. So I'm going to do that as well. So I'm going to copy the virtual repository name. Post that here. All right, so when things get changed, it'll look something like this on my end. Remember to update those where needed. So what I'm going to do is we'll just manually type this out together. So I'm going to go Docker build -T for tagging. I'm going to go my URL and then my virtual repository, which is DevNext Docker and then virtual. And then after that, I'm going to provide the version or the name of the build, as well as the version, and then finally the dot at the end. So I'm going to name mine JFrog DevNext image, and then colon, and then version. I'm going to use a 3-part versioning here, a major, a minor, and then a hotfix. So we're going to say I'm on 107. Then finally space period, and that's just following the Docker build tag formatting. I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to run this command. You can see here that it's building. It's transferring some of that metadata. This will take a little bit of time for the first time you upload your Docker images, but if we upload it a subsequent time, because of our checksum-based storage, it should only take several seconds because that Docker image layers are still in Artifactory. All right. So now that we've got that and the Docker build has been completed, now we're going to push our build into Artifactory. And we're going to be using a very similar command. Instead of doing a Docker build, we are going to do a Docker push. So I'm going to post that in the chat as well. You guys can feel free to type along with me as well. So now we will do a Docker push, solenge.jfrog.io. Going to do the dev next docker-virtual. And then we're going to grab the name and version that you guys provided in your guys' Docker build. So for my instance, it's going to be JFrog DevNext image colon 1.0.7. And then I'm going to give that a push. Oh, I've got an unknown error, and that's because I forgot to set something up. So what I forgot to set up is I'm going to go back to the administration side, head back to repositories, and I forgot to set a default local repository to deploy to. So I'm going to head to the virtual repository, look for my DevNext, and we will be sharing this workshop with you guys afterwards. So if you can't access your instance, or if you did not, or if it is not ready at this moment, you'll be able to go back through the recording and try this yourself. So scrolling down here, what I wanted to set up was the default deployment repository, and I'm going to set that to my local repository. So for those of you who have your repository created, let's go ahead and set this up and then hit save. As you can see here, it was updated successfully. Now, I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to get that set up, as well as go back to our command prompt so we can get this this Docker push reran, so it'll allow everyone to catch up. So let me just give everyone a minute here. All right, for everyone still with me, we're going to just rerun that previous command, the Docker push. So let's try that one more time. All right, there you go. As you can see here, we push the Docker layer, refer to the SHA-256 here is listed out, as well as the size of the artifact. And if we head into the UI, head back to artifacts. All right, Charles, how did I fix the push error? I'll go back and we'll show that one more time. So what we need to do is under the administration tab, for the virtual repository, we have to set a default local repository to push to, and that is what I forgot when we were setting up our virtual repository. So head to repositories, head to virtual, look for your repository. So I'm going to grab the DevNext virtual Docker repository that I had. And then all the way at the bottom, there's a section for default deployment repository. Make sure that you've selected the local repository for that, and then hit save, and then rerun the command. Back in the application side for artifacts, once you have pushed that artifact, you should be able to find that under both the virtual repository. If I open that, there's my DevNext image version 107, as well as under the local repository, it's going to show that as well, because again, the virtual is just the aggregate of everything that exists in the local and the remote repositories. So you can see here, both of them contain image 107, but because of that data deduplication, there is not actually two images stored in your file store. It's only that one Docker image with two database references. All right. So after that, once you guys have completed your Artifactory pushes, we're going to head back to the instance. I'm going to clear this screen real quick. And then we're going to start, and we are actually going to add a configuration using the JFrog CLI. You guys should have installed the CLI before the workshop. If you have not, that's okay. You guys can install that and then just follow along. And again, we're going to share the recording. So for adding a configuration to your JFrog instance, you would do JF for JFrog, config, add, and then name the configuration you want to add. So I'm going to put devn for DevNext, and I'm going to hit enter. It's going to request the URL. So my platform URL is jfrog.solenge.io. So I'm going to keep that the same. I'm going to hit save and continue. And then you can use an access token. We did create an access token earlier. And then we will, you will post that into the chat. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, post it into my chat. It is not configured with a reverse proxy to accept a client certificate. So I'm going to hit N, and we should be good there. So once you have typed in your JFrog URL for your platform, and then posted in either your username and password or the API key or the scope token key that we created earlier in the workshop, you should have that done. And once you have completed the configuration, next we're going to set the CLI to use that configuration. So JF config, and then use. This is perfect for those of you that have multiple JFrog deployments, that you can hold multiple configurations within the JFrog configuration. You just have to specify which one you would like to connect to. And for me, I'm going to hit devn for that newly added configuration. So now I'm using my devn server ID, which is the solenge.jfrog.io. Your guys' URL will be based on the trial instance that you set up before the workshop. So once you're working with that, anything that you can actually do in the JFrog UI, you can do within the CLI. So you won't have to be reliant on making sure that you can navigate to the UI to perform your actions. So from a DevOps standpoint, this is fantastic for automation purposes, as well as just scripting things out so you don't have to manually navigate the UI, so you can speed along a lot of the processes that are repetitive in your day-to-day workday, such as uploading artifacts, which is what we're going to do first. So we are going to do JF for JFrog, RT, this is for Artifactory. So you can actually use all of our applications through the UI, and you specify that based on the second part of your CLI example. So in this instance, JF for JFrog, RT is for Artifactory. And then we're going to upload an artifact. We're going to upload that Froggy zip file that was in that Git pull. So U is going to be for upload, and then just froggy zip, which is the zip file that you want to upload. And this is where our generic repository is going to come in. So if you head back to the UI, you can head to your generic repository, copy the generic repository name, and we'll head back here. And I'm actually going to just manually type this out. So DevNext for me, generic, because we're pushing a zip file to a generic repository, local, and then you can actually specify any further pathing there as well. So I'm just going to put JCK for my initials. And then going to post the command here in the chat as well, so you guys can just follow along with the properties that I'm going to set up. And then I mentioned earlier, whenever you're promoting things to the software development lifecycle, or if you want to use AQL, you can use key value pairs with property sets to help identify your artifacts. So we're going to add a -- and then target props for target properties. And then we are going to set any value that you would like. So for me, I'm just going to type in my initials again, and that is going to be the key. The value is going to be frog because I'm a JFrog. And then I'm going to hit enter, and it should start uploading it. You should see that I have a success here. I'm going to wait a few minutes for everyone else to catch up. But during that time, when I navigate to my generic repository, if I open it, you can see my JCK pathing is there. Here is my froggy zip file. And then under properties, there's my property of JCK and my value of frog. So again, I'm going to post this in the chat so you guys can follow along. And if you, once everyone has had a minute to catch up, I'll continue the demo. Don't worry, Yosef, I've not continued yet. Viadi, let me know if you can hear me. Perfect. All right. So at this point, we're going to continue the workshop. Hopefully everyone is caught up. So now that we've tested uploading an artifact to the CI, we've done a Docker image and uploaded and pushed that Docker build. Now we're going to actually publish the build into Artifactory, gathering the build data as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to head back to our command prompt. I'm going to clear this one more time. And we're going to still be using our JFrog commands, but instead we're going to be using JFrog RT because we're still using Artifactory. And since I've done the Docker build, I'm going to gather some of that Git related builds into a Git bag. So we'll use build dash add dash Git. And then we are going to provide what name of the build that you want to add, and then a version of the build. So for me, I'm going to name the build let's go Super Frog. Now this is case sensitive, so make sure that whenever you're naming your build, you use the same name when gathering all the environmental and statistical metadata, so that way it's all put under one process. Otherwise, whenever you publish your build and it's metadata, things may come out a little different than what you had expected. So, and the build version that I'm going to add is, let's go 45. So we'll run that. It's going to read the Git branch and add that information. I'm going to type the command into the chat as well. Then So for those of you who are still following along, you can add, or you can copy that from the chat and then add your own build name and build number. Give everyone a few seconds to do that, and then we'll start with the next one as well. All right. Hope everyone's had time to catch up. I'm going to paste the next one into the chat as well. Now we're going to collect build environment variables. So you can use the command I just posted in the chat to help with that. So again, JFrog and RT. And then we're going to do build dash collect slash or dash E and V for the environment variables. And then use the same build name and build number that you used from the previous command. So for me, JFrog, and then 45. So it collected all those for me. Should be a relatively simple command this time, guys, since we have our build name and build number predefined. And then when you're done with that, we are finally going to publish the build and its metadata into Artifactory. And you'll use the command that I'm posting right here, which is build publish. So again, JF for JFrog, RT for Artifactory, and then build dash publish. And then again, the same case sensitive build name and build version. So for me, it's JFrog, and then build 45. I'm going to hit enter. It should say that's deploying the build info and that it's been successfully deployed. It'll also let you know where you can navigate to find this information. So again, we're going to give another minute for everyone who's still running in the workshop to follow along. But we'll also show here under Artifactory, outside of artifacts, you do have a build tab. So the build tab is going to will host all of the build info that you find. So it's another source of navigation for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for my JFrog. Here it is here, JFrog, again, case sensitive. It's got my build ID of 45. If we click into it, you'll see the build ID. You can scan these with X-ray as well, so your builds can be secured with our SCA tool. I'm going to click into the build ID. And what you can see here is a whole host of additional information. Sorry about that, guys. And then, we've got the build info.json here. So everything that you need to reproduce the build, you can see here, a lot of it came from my username on my local's Windows machine. But if it's a Jenkins or Bamboo file, you can find things there as well. But I'll give everyone another minute to get things set up real quick, make sure that everyone's caught up. All right, so hopefully everyone has had time to catch up. And if not, it's okay, because we are sharing this recording afterwards. So I'm sorry for those who weren't able to follow along. But if you have been able to pull the information from Git, we are going to do the AQL part of our presentation now. So I'm going to head back to my, my DevNext workshop that I pulled from Git, and I'm going to grab the files from the AQL zip file. It's going to be a JSON file and a PowerShell script. So if you guys have PowerShell, you can follow along. If not, you can utilize the commands in it and create a bash script to follow along with us. So I'm just going to move these out here. Just going to paste them to where I can use them in PowerShell. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to pull up my PowerShell ISE. And so in there are two files. We're going to open both of these. So the first one is going to be, I believe it's, yeah. So, yeah, so pull build to freeze demo. sorry about the name there. And it's going to be just a very simple command or a very simple PowerShell script here. And then the other file is going to be the find artifacts that match the naming pattern JSON file. And so the JSON file is the actual Artifactory query language. And essentially, we are going to specify a repository name and replace that here, and then use a key value to pull the artifact. So if we head back to the PowerShell script, what you can see here is we're using our JFrog CLI. And what we're doing is a JFrog RT for Artifactory, and then S is going to be search. And we are going to specify the JSON file and convert it to JSON format for PowerShell to read. And we're going to store the results here as this variable. After that, we're simply just going to write the path of the artifact that we find out to the command prompt. But from here, you can actually take the results and you can manipulate them in any way that you need using the JFrog CLI. Again, anything that you can do in the UI, you can do in the CLI. So if you need to do build promotion, manipulation of the artifact itself, add new property sets or change property sets or values, you can do that using any sort of scripting language as long as you've got the CLI. So we're going to head back to the file spec and we're going to replace these names. So let's find a repo that we want to pull the artifact from. So we'll head back to the UI, head to artifacts, research DevNext. So that way we are on the repositories that we went with. I'm going to go into this dev local. See if we've got a property set here in dev local. No, let's add a property set to our dev local. So I'm going to add DevNext 2023. And the value we are going to add is frog. Let's just add frog. And that's going to be our property set. So this could be anything that you guys need, whether it be something from QA testing or a pass fail, any sort of key value pair that you need. You can also add predefined property sets. So if you're adding multiple properties, you can predefine those for your software development lifecycle. But for here, we're just going to be looking for DevNext value frog, and we're going to use the dev local Docker. So let me just go ahead and grab that. We're going to paste that here into our JSON file, and then we'll go back to the UI, add our DevNext and our value frog, and we should be able to find that here. So DevNext value frog. So here you can see with Artifactory query language, we're just doing a file search using AQL, again, Artifactory query language, do a build find based on the repository and the property value DevNext 2023 with the frog value. So I'm going to save that. And if we head back to our PowerShell example and we run that, and give that a second to run. Oh, just 1 second. I may have miscopied something. Sorry about this, guys. Give me just a moment to see if I can find the issue. Case of the frog property. That may be it. Probably no. Case is the same. In any case, if we can't get this to work, I'm sorry, we'll push out an update to the AQL example on GitHub, and we'll be able to, you guys will be able to pull that if needed. So, open. That's what happened. Give me just a moment. My AQL did not update because I opened it in the PowerShell ISC and not in my notepad. So let me just save that in my notepad. So let me resume my share. You can see here that I updated it here in Notepad rather than in my PowerShell ISC that saved it as a text file. So let me try and run this one more time. No. Okay, sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and we're just going to move forward. I'll work on getting this updated for you guys, and I'll push that to Git later today. So with that, let me. All right, so that concludes our workshop today. So we've gone through what exactly DevOps is and how Artifactory works in the throughout that software development lifecycle. We've gone over some of the key features of Artifactory. We've created 3 different repository types within Artifactory, used the CLI to create a build and publish the build with its build info into Artifactory. And then we've gone through a small example with AQL. With that, I'll hand things back over to Bill Manning so he can kind of send us off.
Right on. Hey, Jacob, thank you for the amazing work you've done here. I hope everybody has really appreciated the time and effort that Jacob has put in. We will definitely be sharing out the session after this. And like Jacob said, we'll be sending a follow-up. So guys, please keep an eye out for, of course, you will get a badge saying that you completed the workshop, which is awesome. Also look for your $30 gift card. Not a bad thing to look forward to. Just to let you know, we do have another one of these, which I will be hosting. Will be around JFrog security. That'll be on November 15th. I'm really looking forward to the next set of people that will be doing this. Actually, it's funny as I will be actually hosting this from London while this is going on. And then at the same time, just to let you know, your trial license will be extended all the way to the end of this year to December 27th. So you can follow along with the rest of the workshops, keep your work in place. On top of that, just to let you guys know, if you wanted to do some continued education, I am actually going to be putting in the chat here a couple of extra links. I would recommend going to our JFrog Academy. It's a fantastic location for a lot of information. A lot of the stuff that Jacob also went over, by the way, is also available inside of our wiki. So I sent a link to the wiki also. And then on top of that, if you really feel adventurous, we also have our YouTube page where we have a lot of good instructional information and videos that are available there. Besides, also things of thought leadership ideas and all that. I love that word, thought leadership. This means that us talking about what we think the future is. It's like, it's really cool stuff. But thank you all for coming. We really appreciate everybody attending today. If you have any more questions, please let us know. Send follow-ups. We'll be sending follow-up emails out to you guys here. I look forward to this. Jacob, once again, thank you so much for your time and effort. And it was amazing. I really appreciate you, dude. And everybody have a fantastic day. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Be safe, be wonderful, be well, everyone. I think one more slide, and then let's kick it. Let's turn it off. Thank you, everyone.